This conference will now be recorded.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Fanwood project here, the South Avenue Transportation Infrastructure Project in Fanwood. This is a meeting that will be recorded and available on the Fanwood website for anyone who has missed it. Tonight, what you're going to hear about is the overview of the project led by our project presenter. His name is Mike Troncone, and he's with CME Associates. And for those of you calling in or available on the computer, my name is Nicole Pace Adeo. I am the moderator tonight. I work for a company called Stokes Creative Group, and I will be monitoring the chat box as well as facilitating Q&A when we get to that at the end of the presentation. Just a couple of quick notes. We do want everyone to please stay muted during the presentation. It makes it a lot easier to eliminate any background noise. Once again, if you are calling in or on your computer, you can find your microphone button at the bottom of your screen. And I do see many of you have your cameras on, which is always nice for us to see everyone who's on. So thank you for leaving your computer cameras on. You can wave to me if you have questions, or you can just wave to me if you'd like to wave. It's always nice to see friendly faces. So I'm going to monitor the chat box, as I said, and when we get to Q&A, we will give everyone the opportunity to discuss their comments and questions with Mike. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Troncone.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you for the introduction. Again, my name is Mike Troncone. I'm the project manager for CME Associates for this Transportation Alternative Program. It's a federal grant that was received by the borough for this project that I'm about to present to you. And again, thank you all for coming out. We're interested to see what the public has to say and to receive your input. So. Basically, the purpose of this project is to provide for pedestrian access along South Avenue between Terrell and Martine Drive, Martine Road. It's Martine Avenue. So again, that's the purpose of this project. That was the intention of the grant that the borough asked for. Again, the limits run from along South Avenue from Tower Road to Martine Avenue. The project sponsor is the borough of Fanwood. The funding for this project, again, is a federal grant, transportation alternative grant, that the borough received back in 2016. The borough had received the funding in the amount of $1,202,750. It's kind of a weird number, but that's the amount of the grant that the borough received, and it's being administered through the NJDOT local aid. The funds are being funneled through the local aid group. Basically, CME Associates, who I work for, was put on a list of consultants that the borough could choose off of. There was 5 or 6 consultants through what they call a design assistance program. And what this design assistance program is to have qualified consultants help the borough through the federal aid process and the project delivery in itself. These costs are covered through the NJDOT, all the soft costs related to the design, so it does not have to impact the cost of the grant that the borough received. Since it's a federally funded project, we have to follow what they call the NEPA process, which is a process developed by the federal government to ensure environmental stewardship and that the project meets the requirements, and has a proper outreach to obtain input from the local community and stakeholders. So that's kind of a little bit over an overview. Basically, the project has will have 3 phases of design, or 3 phases of work. One is preliminary engineering, which is what we're in now. So under this phase, I'll get into a little bit, is the preliminary engineering. We'll get our preliminary layouts or preliminary design, get all our environmental clearances needed for the federal grant. And then come up with a preferred alternative for them to be advanced to what we call final design. Under final design, we will get all of our right-of-way clearances, get all of our bid documents, any other approvals that are needed under final design, and have it prepared and ready for bidding for construction. The third phase is the construction phase, at which time, the project will be out to bid, a contractor will be selected, and there'll be, engineer on site during construction. So those are the three phases. As I'd mentioned, the project goals and objectives are the installation of sidewalks and improved accessibility for pedestrians along South Avenue. The borough put in for a very competitive grant application, and the borough was successful in receiving these federal funds. Basically, one of the other things, since this is and also in addition to the pedestrians, there is a streetscape component to this project. And basically under preliminary engineering, one of the things we want to get out there is get some of the designs and the themes and visuals to aid the public in getting a sense of what, the project is going to look like. So we'll be going over that as well. One of the other preliminary major steps, again, is the consultation with stakeholders, and also to have discussions with some of the reviewing agencies. South Avenue in itself is an actual DOT, it's State Highway 28. It's a state highway, so there needs to be a lot of consultation and discussions, and we need to meet all the requirements for NJDOT as a state roadway facility. And I'll get into that a little bit as well. We'll be doing, basically our engineering design with agency review and approvals. We've already met with the NJDOT Access Bureau and Right-of-Way Bureau. They're the folks that administer the access needs and access requirements under state access code. So we met with them and got their input, and all of that is reflected on these drawings, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Basically, like I said, we want to refine our landscape layouts and identify the materials we're going to use on the streetscaping. We're conducting a public information meeting, which is what we're doing now. We've advertised the project in newspapers. We've advertised the project on the borough's website, sent out notices, as well as emails to most of the project stakeholders. At the conclusion of this preliminary engineering phase, we are going to be preparing our preliminary documentation, which are plans and estimates, as well as some reports that are required by the NJDOT as in closure of this phase of the project. And then we'll get authorization for the next phase of design, which is final design. So that's the next step on this project. And basically secure agency authorizations and approvals. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Again, like I said, we're doing a community and a stakeholder outreach. Some of the stakeholders, or some of the boards and commissions at the borough, the DPW, police. So we go out and look to procure input from all these officials, local officials, township officials, to obtain their input at the, in this phase of the project. Because by the time we go to final design, we really want to have a lot of those obstacles worked out under this phase. We'll obviously receive input from any nonprofits or interest groups. Some of that information was provided to us, and mailers went out, for instance, to the local historical groups, some other historical groups, as well as the business community. Again, stakeholders are the government agency. Union County, it has jurisdiction over Martine and Terrell Road, so they'll be involved in the review of this project as well as the NJDOT. We've already had some discussions. As well as private entities and general public. I know there has been some discussions with some property owners related to this project. Again, we want to make sure that we don't get too far down the road and have these issues creep up later. Basically, so what have we learned? So based on our discussions we've had so far with some officials and some stakeholders, we want to keep the streetscaping that it should be low maintenance and complement the existing borough streetscaping standards, which are present currently at the current existing redevelopment area down by Martine. So we want to look to have a consistent theme, obviously, for many reasons. So that's one of the things we learned. Driveway alterations and modifications, as well as property access during construction, is required for the new sidewalk installation. So obviously putting the sidewalk in, we're going to have better defined access points and driveways along the roadway, and obviously, and that is is actually driven by the New Jersey Department's access code, state access code, and we'll get into that a little bit. We're going to assess access and driveways for properties on South Avenue, again to improve safety, and I'll get into that a little bit, in compliance with the NJDOT Access Management Code, and if necessary, pursue waivers through that if it's deemed detrimental to the property. Again, we'll be presenting some of the property alterations. Obviously, for this project, ideally, to do construction, some of the disturbances and improvements do extend onto private property, and ideally, the borough would like to obtain that through a right of entry. If possible, that's a process where the property owners agree to sign off on the improvements, or through access. If there's access improvements, that we have to go through what they call the access process, and that includes preparing access agreements, which is the NJDOT process, and we'll also be getting right of entry and authorization and approvals from the property owners through that. If the property owner objects at that time, then we would have to go to a right-of-way process, which would delay the project to go through that whole process. But if it's necessary, that's what we have to do. New design should consider borough redevelopment and other known proposed development. Obviously, there's an existing redevelopment site down by Martine, and the borough is currently actively redeveloping a portion of the project near Old South Avenue. That's a Carano Square redevelopment. So we're going to be working closely with that redeveloper and make sure that whatever they do and what we do, it's kind of supportive of each other for consistency purposes. So this is basically what we've learned so far. I'll just kind of walk you real quickly through the improvements here. We're going to be replacing existing and construct new sidewalk and driveway aprons, basically along the extent of the project. We're going to realign Old South Avenue and improve access onto South Avenue. Right now, the Old South Avenue comes in at a pretty significant skew. And again, I'll go through that when I walk through the plans. Where required, we're going to restore pavement on adjoining property owners' properties fronting the driveways. So any alterations necessary to complement the sidewalk, which may include alterations to some of the adjacent property, grass, pavement, that will be, so everything kind of matches up. That's included in the project. Replace the existing curb where needed for some of the driveway improvements, and so that's pretty much relegated to that. Install new traffic stripes on some of the approach roadways. We may need to replace some striping there. We're not looking to touch the existing roadway pavement. We're not here to mill or pave or do any pavement restorations to Route 28. That is beyond the scope of this project. It's strictly related to the sidewalk. Again, if there are some impacts to that, then if it's an absolute necessity, then we will do that. Also, to put in new ADA compliant ramps at all the intersecting side roads to make sure they meet the ADA standards. Most of the ramps out there were recently replaced, and I think a majority of them are compliant, but those that aren't, we will be replacing those. We are going to install new crosswalks across the side road intersections. There's no proposed crosswalks across Route 28 between Martine or Terrell. So we're not putting any crosswalks along the state highway. Pedestrians will be, basically looking to be crossed at those signalized intersections at the bookends of the project. Also streetscaping, like I said, we're doing some new textured sidewalks. So it's not just a sidewalk, it's going to have a look, it's going to have a feel, and we'll go through that a little bit. We're going to put some ornamental street lights, the limits of which, I'll go over a little bit, but essentially we're trying to keep the ornamental lighting and street lights to those commercial properties. There are some residential properties along the project, which we're not really looking to put the street lights in those locations. We have some decorative benches, trash receptacles, planters, and street trees with grates. And again, I'll go through that on the plan. We're also going to construct what we call a bike parking area near the train station in the existing, I guess there's a seating area right at the corner of Martine. So we're going to add some bike racks to that location, and as well as a bicycle repair, which I'll show you that in a little bit. So we're going to kind of clean that up. We're also going to put a new surface on that area. A new concrete surface. We're looking at using a stamping concrete as opposed to pavers from a maintenance standpoint. That's more of an ideal situation. The pavers tend to settle and crack and get water in them. So we're looking to use a stamping of the concrete. We'll go into that in a little bit as well. And we're also going to, we'll consult with NJDOT and New Jersey NJDOT about the installation of bus shelters in certain areas and certain locations. Again, that's, will be coordinated as the project moves forward. We haven't, we've identified the locations, but we haven't confirmed whether we're going to put shelters in those locations yet. So basically, existing conditions, I'm just going to kind of walk you through, some slides and some, you live there, you know this, but just to kind of point out some specific areas. For instance, on this slide on the left here of the photo is the existing redevelopment area down near Martine. We are not intending to touch this area, but we're looking to mimic this look is part of this project. The second photo is in front of the train station. This area will be restored with new sidewalk and pavers. The existing ornamental lights there now will not be replaced, but as we move down, because we're going to go with the same look of light fixture. The third photo is a photo in front of the residential area, the sidewalk. Existing sidewalk is kind of old and it doesn't meet current standards. New ADA standards require 5-foot wide sidewalks to allow for passing of wheelchairs. So in these existing sidewalk areas, we're going to replace them and make them a foot wider. In some areas, there are some conflict with some trees, so some trees may come out, but we are planting all new trees along the route. The slide on the right is just an example of a lot of the conditions out there. You have sidewalk that's broken and divided by driveway entrances. Our goal would be to extend the sidewalk through the driveway aprons and also have the driveway aprons, but to have a consistent sidewalk throughout and with a better look. Again, on the left here, a slide is another location. Again, you can see it's kind of bituminous. The matching of the sidewalk and the apron, bituminous driveway apron aren't clean. So, again, the second slide also shows that as well. Has a bump. So we're going to kind of smooth all of these areas out. The third area is down near the liquor store near Old South Avenue. That sidewalk is going to continue along South Avenue. Right now, you can see it's just the ramp. Also, I guess as part of this redevelopment going on here, there are some proposed alterations to the liquor store area. So I'll get to that a little bit. And again, this is just an example on the right here of an existing road opening that doesn't go anywhere. So I think, we're looking to kind of close this off because if there's no road street, it's kind of confusing and it's not very safe. People may turn in here and there's woods right as soon as you turn into the side street. So there's no connection there, but we'll go through that in a minute. Again, just some general photos, of this disjointed sidewalk, and also on Old South Avenue, which is the photo all the way to the right. We're going to kind of reconfigure Old South Avenue to make it safer and more direct. Again, this is the bike parking area. We're going to put a new textured surface in here. The game plan is to reuse these benches here and keep them. But if they need to be replaced, that's one of the things we'll look at closer when we get the final design. But this area, again, we're not touching the clock or the walls or anything like that. We're just looking to replace the walking surface, add a bike rack, and I'll go into that a little bit. A couple bike racks. This is the Old South Avenue area, and as you can see, it's kind of a weird configuration. It's not very safe for pedestrians. You have this very severely skewed intersection coming into South Avenue. The pedestrians are forced to kind of make this weird maneuver here. It's just not an ideal situation. It's not the safest. There's also some parking areas where actually the properties back out onto State Highway, and they're actually within the state's right of way. When we met with the Access Bureau, that's an illegal parking stall. So they've asked us to see if there's an opportunity to clean that up. So I'll get into that a little bit. And then you have another weird situation over here all the way to the right where you have this very severe intersection into the state highway, and then you have an access, and it's just not a clean look and it's not a clean operation. So we're also going to look at cleaning that up as well. And there's a lot of conflicts, and you're trying to put pedestrians in there. It's just not a safe condition. So again, presentation board, sidewalk, and I'm going to go through now. I'm going to start getting into some of the design itself. I have some of the boards. We'll discuss the sidewalk and project limits, the streetscaping improvements, the bus stop and curb cuts, access improvements, discuss the Old South Avenue reconfiguration, the bicycle parking area, and the overall, so some of the property access. In general, as it relates to the property access, we essentially, for all intents and purposes, we're looking to maintain the existing driveways. In some instances, we had to define the driveway openings because they're wide open along a state highway, and you don't want that free open condition on a state highway, because there's a lot of, you want to try to channel people entering and out of properties, not only for safety from the vehicles, but also for promoting pedestrian traffic to also, you know, have a safe condition for pedestrians to walk. So we'll kind of get into that. So I'm going to right now, it's having issues with this before. I'm going to jump over to some of the presentation boards. So if they start freaking out a little bit, they do eventually fix themselves. And here we go. So I found if I jump back and forth between them, eventually they stop doing this, but we'll see. Just give me a minute here while this kind of cleans itself up.
And while Mike is getting our presentation boards set up on the screen, I do see we have a couple of questions already into the chat box, which is great. So please do keep your questions and comments coming. And in just a few minutes, when Mike's finished presenting this portion and we get into our Q&A, we will go through them and have a nice open discussion. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Nicole. Thanks for the update. So basically what you're going to see on this plan here and what I've demonstrated, there's a little legend down here, you know, where we're proposing our trash receptacles, proposed street trees with grates, existing trees. Like I said, we are removing some trees because they're interfering with the sidewalk or interfering with our ability to widen the sidewalk, and those are shown on here. We're showing the location of proposed planters, proposed bus shelters, benches, proposed luminaires as well. Now the limits of the luminaire are still up in the air right now. They're very expensive, and we're trying to keep in line with the budget that the borough has. So we may have to scale back some of the luminaires when we get to, you know, as we move forward here. So I want to kind of point that out. Existing curb ramps to be reconstructed. So like I said, the curb ramps being the ADA ramps, some of them are substandard, so we'll be replacing those, and there's a symbol. We are replacing some curbs, like I said, to either to help define driveway openings better, or to, you know, replace some you know, as part of the aprons that new aprons we're putting in. And then we are doing some asphalt driveway restoration. So I'll kind of go through that with you in a little bit. I'll show you an example so you can get a general visual. The yellow areas, excuse me, are new concrete, and the red areas are stamped concrete. So basically they're going to be a narrow strip that runs between the sidewalk and the edge of pavement. And we're using this, and they are, you know, this, I guess, this staggered brick look, and they're going to run in the direction of the sidewalk. So visually, you know, it's going to be, you know, linear look. And then some areas, like I said, we're doing some restorations of some grass areas just because, you know, to get the sidewalks in. So as you can see here, like this crossed hatch area is an area where we'll have to go in and replace or saw cut and put in new pavement to get the matching and the transitions between the driveway and the property. So you'll see them as we move throughout. And in some instances, we had to do it to kind of get some circulation, a better circulation or in a particular driveway or property. So again, like Nicole said, I mean, if you have answers on a specific location, I can jump back and forth between the two. So as you can see here, driving down from Terrell Avenue, we have, you know, we're putting some street trees over here in the Exxon. NJDOT had asked us to eliminate this driveway opening here at the Exxon because from an operational standpoint, you really don't want conflicting movements here. They prefer if you know, in this instance, if we just had the egress and ingress further to the property. So that's what they're proposing to do here, as well as add a bus shelter at this location. Again, we're going with a sidewalk, 5-foot wide sidewalk with a 3-foot paver buffer in front of the commercial areas. So you'll see that. This is the location in front of the K9 Resort where the DOT had issue with the parking situation because having people back up in and out of onto a state highway is it does not meet the access management code. So we're going to put in a new sidewalk here and close and grass this area of the project. Move on to the next. So this is the old South Avenue area. So what we're looking at and considering doing, the existing roadway kind of comes in at this really weird skew, is to reline Old South Avenue so it becomes more of a 90-degree angle, and then the borough would vacate this portion of the Old South Avenue, and then to provide and maintain the access that currently goes back to the rear of these properties. So now they'll have their own driveway, and the opening for the roadway is there's no conflict between that movement. There would be some new drainage needed here, and we would put in a grass strip and the driveway definition island here. The area in front of the liquor store here would be grassed, and then the parking stalls with access from Old South Avenue is what we're proposing to do at this location. Again, you can see the driveways. Like I said, for all intents and purposes, we're really kind of maintaining the existing driveways. Some areas we are making some alterations. This location over here is all under the redevelopment area for Carano Square. So under that redevelopment, they're proposing a new driveway opening here. So that will eventually be reflected on here. And then the redeveloper may or probably will, as part of their redevelopment, is build a portion of the sidewalk in front of their redevelopment, because it doesn't make sense to kind of it's like the chicken and egg thing. So we're kind of going to work that out. But the Old South Avenue is going to be closed off at this location as part of the redevelopment. Again, working our way down, again, we have street and ornamental lights along the route, and the tree planters and trees. Again, there's a series of trees over here that we will be removing. But when we get into these residential areas, we're going to go with basically your more traditional, just a grass buffer with a 5-foot sidewalk. So that's kind of the look we're going in front of the residential homes. And where I said where we have commercial, we're going to go with that paver strip. All right, we're proposing to do that. And again, like these driveways have been designed so that you have proper access transition from the travel or from the roadway to the driveway. So there's some minor grading alterations that need to happen here to kind of get a good transition for vehicles entering, exiting, entering. And, as part of the construction, and we're going to have another meeting under final design where we'll have these designs a little further refined. I mean, like I said, we're still in preliminary. We did do some preliminary engineering, but this property over here, for instance, I guess is the Wonder Years Academy. We're looking at having one opening because that's what the access code really calls for. Currently, there's a kind of a weird, you come in and go out. So this maneuver is doable by vehicles, and then they would exit through one driveway here. We do there. Again, some of these driveways you can see we're kind of going back here a little bit on this property because of the grade. It's a fairly steep driveway, so that'll all be engineered. And again, like I said, the consistency here on this side where we have the residential is the strip and the concrete. Working our way down. Again, like I said, most of the driveways we're not really changing. We're just kind of matching them up with the sidewalk. So the sidewalks are going through the driveway openings. Again, we're over here. This property over here, we're going to create one driveway opening in here for egress and ingress, and then and kind of close. This area is kind of wide open right now, so we want to have. You don't really want a big wide open area that conflicts with pedestrian traffic. So we're trying to define the driveways and create a safer environment for pedestrian use. And then this is the gas station over here. There's a property over here. They have kind of like a shared driveway here. So these businesses, so they'll still be maintaining that shared driveway, and egress point is over here as well. No, we did look at, the tanker truck movements through here, and it did work. So, kind of that. And again, there's another shared driveway here for this property in here. Yeah, these parking stalls are legal because they're not within the state's right of way. So there was no issue with these parking stalls. Now we're getting down near the Fanwood train station here. Again, we're going to essentially maintain these driveways. I did want to point out, I guess there's a restaurant over here that actually has a curb cut, and I guess they created outdoor seating. I'm trying to locate that property. Maybe it wasn't the right spot. We're going to maintain that opening, although it's not an ideal situation. Oh, here it is. Oh no, we're going to close this. Or we can leave the curb cut here. We're discussing that with DOT because I guess they have an outdoor seating here now, and I guess their access goes through here now. We really didn't find an agreement between the two property owners. It's probably just understood. So I'm sorry, when we spoke with the DOT, we are going to leave a driveway opening here for the future because we can't not give access to this. So this Fabino's Bistro, there will still be a curb cut here, but their driveway right now is a shared driveway over here. We do have to eliminate parking in this area fronting this building because, again, we don't make the rules, we're just following them. The state doesn't allow for parking within states right of way for private use. So we're just going to be basically putting in white stripes here and a white stripe here to prevent, to not allow parking at those locations for now. And then again, going down through the train station, we're not really we're adding some additional benches in here. They're going to be bumped out a little bit, so they're kind of going to be nooked into along the sidewalk to have a nice seating area. There's some trees there now, so it's actually a nice area to sit. And there'll also be a bus stop, a shelter placed here. And then this is the bicycle parking area, which I'll get into a little bit. We're also recommending a shelter over here at this location. But again, we still need to have discussions with New Jersey Transit and the DOT on those, just to get a sign off. All right, so from there, I'm going to kind of jump in. Again, I have all these, when we go to Q&A, I'll have all these boards available for discussion. I also have my landscape architect on the call, so if there's specific questions regarding the landscaping. But again, we're we're mimicking what's out there now in terms of the treatments for the benches. We're calling out very similar. This bench is ornamental, and we're kind of taking the look that's already existing in that sitting area down near Martine. Excuse me. And we're also going to be putting in similar tree grates to what's currently out there in front of the new redevelopment area. And we're going to have decorative planters, strategically placed certain locations, recycling and trash receptacles located at certain locations along the route. We're going to go with the same ornamental light fixture that's out there now, and we're going to extend them down. Like I said, they'll probably more than likely just be extended down to the Carano redevelopment area. Whether we extend them all the way down to Terrell is really going to come down to a cost thing. But again, this is the stamped concrete, that red strip in there. You're going to have this kind of look with this, with just a regular concrete sidewalk. In the we'll call them the bicycle parking area, we're going to have, currently these benches are already there. This is kind of the arrangement we're looking at. We're going to put in this new stamped concrete surface in there. Again, stamping's lower maintenance. And then we're going to have a bike rack along the back side. I think the borough is looking to have some landscaping done. Not under this contract, under another contract, and we're going to have this bicycle repair station, which has a air pump on it and some other equipment to repair bikes if needed. So that'll be in the back side. This being Martine, this being South Avenue. So, so that pretty much kind of wraps up my presentation in terms of what we're proposing to do. You know, and then I really, after, you know, let me kind of walk through this a little bit, and then we'll maybe open it up to questions just to kind of go through where we are with things right now. So we've essentially gone through and done our field surveys, our environmental screenings. So there's really not a lot of environmental issues out here. It's very kind of an urban area. You know, we're doing our PE design and reporting and estimates. You know, once we get through this meeting, address stakeholders' input, we'll be finalizing our estimates. I'll obviously doing some additional consultation with DOT and transit. And then we'll be preparing our documentation, which are basically our plans and our estimate, and then getting our environmental document, which is required by the federal government. It's what they call a category exclusion document. That's being prepared by the NJDOT. They'll basically take our plans and do their environmental stewardship and document. And then we'll complete, you know, then that'll get approved and we'll complete our PE. So we're looking at the fall of this year to have all of that done and buttoned up. And then our goal here is to, whoops, kind of jump in here. Then our goal is to start final design, because once we get through PE in the fall, then it's got to go for an authorization process, the funding for the next phase. So we're looking to start final design in the spring, this time next year, hopefully sooner, and go to construction in early in 2023. So that's kind of our schedule right now that we're looking at for the project. So with that said, I'm going to kind of go to my Q&A session here, and I'll kind of hand this over to Nicole to kind of, you know, facilitate.
No problem. No problem. Thanks, Mike. Okay, so we did receive quite a number of comments and questions into the chat box throughout the presentation. So thank you to everyone who was asking. I think you guys are going to have some really good questions, including the questions about the landscape and architecture, as we were just talking. So I'm going to go in order that they were received. And again, the chat box is located at the upper right-hand corner of your screen. You can see right there on the screen, we've got a little diagram of where it's located. And we are going to have, when we're finished with all of these questions, we will give everyone the opportunity, if there's anything that you'd like to ask the team verbally, or for those of you who have called in, I will be calling on you if you'd like to ask questions, and we will unmute you one at a time so you can ask your questions. Okay, let's get right into it. So I'm going to start right back at the beginning and ask the first question, which was, what is the width of the project? Also, will there be any improvement to the private portion of any of the properties, or is the project only in the borough's right-of-way?
Well, the limits of the project run from Martine to Terrell Road. So that's the overall length of the project, and, you know, whatever that is, a half a mile or whatever. So that's the limits of the project. Now, it's actually it's a state highway. So the right of way is in New Jersey Department of Transportation. What's going to eventually end up having to be done here is these streetscape improvements. There's going to need to be a maintenance agreement between the borough and the state, and they'll come to an agreement on what elements and portions of the project will be maintained by the borough and what will be maintained by the state of New Jersey, NJDOT. As far as impacts to private property, like I had mentioned earlier, there will be the need to do some pavement restoration, some grass restoration work outside of the existing right-of-way to get, you know, to have a good transition between the new sidewalk edge and the property, the adjoining property. So your question, I kind of hope that answered your question.
Great. And if it for any reason it does not, again, please feel free to use the chat box and add in your comments or additional questions. Okay, I'm confused about the crosswalks. There will be none added, nothing at Sheelan's?
Right now, we're not proposing any mid-block crossings across the state highway. The only crosswalks we'll be providing is at the side roads that currently exist. So, say for instance, at Staggered Place, there will be crosswalks placed across these locations if it's needed. For instance, if the existing striping is adequate and sufficient, then we'll probably maintain it. If it's dulled and needs to be replaced. So in final design, we will, you know, in a year from now, look and reassess these crosswalks and put new crosswalks in if they're needed at the side roads only. We're not planning on any mid-block crossings.
Okay. Back, I believe in the PowerPoint, Mike, you showed a location of an existing curb cut which leads to a wooded area which will be eliminated. What is the plan for that little bit of land there? Is it possible to turn this into a pocket park, seating area, etc.?
Well, as part of this project, I mean, the grant themselves are very specific. So in terms of what we can and can't do as far as the funding's concerned. So that's a borough roadway right now. It's borough right of way for that particular. I can't remember what street it is. You'll have to excuse me. I think is it fourth? No, fifth? No, I'm not wrong way. You'll have to excuse me because this takes up a lot of screen here. But the long story short is really at the end of the day, the borough would have to vacate it as being a public road used for a public road. And then from there, if they want to do something in terms of creating a pocket park, that's really something that the borough is going to have to, no, I'm sorry, here it is. It's this road here. I forget the name of the road, but yeah, we're going to basically take out the pavement, put seating down and put a crosswalk in. I mean, a sidewalk in it. In the future, the borough plans to do that. That's really up to the borough. That's really, but it's not part of this project at this time.
Okay. Okay. Back to the area near the liquor store. The comment in question is, while I think sidewalks and general beautification is important in this area, what is being done about the giant gaping hole that is the empty lot near the liquor store? Any plans there?
Again, you know, I can't really speak beyond the project because that's our specific focus right now. I mean, as relates to the redevelopment or any work associated with that in itself is really kind of a discussion that needs to be had, you know, with borough officials. We're, like I said, we're just basically retained to do the sidewalk and what we're, you know, designed or tasked to do. So I'm not specifically sure exactly what hole you're talking about, but I guess this is meaning a property hole.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes,
yeah, so that would be a question that, you know, maybe you may want to ask the borough separately, or you know, maybe at a council meeting or through a phone call. So.
Okay. And this next question is the stamped concrete going to be a particular color? Can you speak to the longevity of that stamped concrete? I seem to recall seeing stamped concrete in Scotch Plains, which didn't hold its color long term.
Well, that's kind of a question I'm going to hand over to Dominic, our landscape architect.
So yeah, I mean, as far as the colors, I think the intent is to match the area of the newly redeveloped area, you know, with those gray tones, to kind of keep that borough standard, as far as the colors go. As far as color fading, it depends on, you know, installation and making sure you have the right installer and making sure they're putting in, you know, the correct sealers um, and with that being said, you know, every let's say 5 or 6 years, or you know, depending on, you know, the how it actually you know, reacts, you know, and maintains itself. There are sealers that can go on to the stamped concrete that essentially, you know, make the stamped concrete look brand new. As far as like longevity, it's just as you know, will last just as long as concrete. You know, 25 plus years. So yeah, so there are ways to give the stamped concrete a new look if they start to fade, but they hold off pretty well. And while you may have walking on those areas, I think, a lot of the walking might be on the concrete itself, where those areas up along the roadway may not be walked on as much.
Dominic, do they have warranties on these? Or, I mean, how does that work typically with the manufacturers?
Yeah, yeah, there is. I mean, it depends on, exactly what you're talking about,
Mhm.
so we would have to, look into that.
Great. Thank you, guys. Question here. If Canine Resorts loses their parking in front of the building, do they no longer meet the parking requirements for their property?
That's really that's really a land use question here. Basically, that they're currently utilizing parking that's not technically on their property. So in terms of, and again, I'm not here to talk about the land use itself, and if it does go into a right-of-way negotiation, if it becomes to that, that's all considered as part of the cost to cure. But again, that those parking stalls technically in a way shouldn't be there because they're illegal. So it's really not a matter of creating harm. It's because they're not supposed to be there anyway. But there are some discussions that we're planning on having with some of these impacted property owners to kind of get their thoughts and find out if there's a way some cure that can be done to their particular properties. But I'm not, we can't speak to that right now. But when we meet with the state, and this is any different than any other state highway project, when you run into situations where parking is illegal, there's like I said, the state access management code, which is it's a state law. Then when we do this improvement, we have no other options but to follow the code. But they do have parking in the rear of their property, and they do have a shared, this access that's currently there now is a shared driveway. So they do have access and areas of parking in the rear of their property. But again, this is an old property. It goes back, it's probably been there for, God knows how long. So, it is in a way kind of grandfathered in.
Okay, great. Another question about landscaping. While I generally support more vegetation, is it really worth planting such small areas of grass, like in front of the PSE&G substation, which likely won't be maintained? Is it possible to have those areas gravelled and left as pervious cover?
Well, if there's grass now, we typically just put grass back. That's kind of what we did. So, I mean, we'll just kind of topsoil it and seed it. We're not, I know the state's not fans of using stones and rocks anywhere near the highway because it's an opportunity to get out on the roadway and then chip people's windshields. But, basically our game plan here is if it's grass now, it's to put grass back. I mean, we are widening the sidewalk in some of these areas. So, like I said, there'll be if there's a grass buffer there now, or it's just basically putting it back. We usually don't do that.
Okay. And I just want to note that we do have, I think there's about 10 or 12 more questions. So you've definitely been utilizing the chat box, and thank you everybody. We're going to get to everyone's questions and comments. I'm going through them literally one by one in order they were received. So thank you again for putting them into the chat box. Okay, the schedule, Mike, you did talk about the schedule. We're in PE and then FD and then construction. One of the questions was, how long will construction take once it's started, do you think?
It's a little premature for that. In our next public meeting, in their final design, we kind of that's where we get into refining the construction schedule. I really can't right now give you an exact time frame, but in all honesty, this shouldn't really be a long duration construction. There's really no work in traffic areas. So it should go relatively quickly. I mean, obviously, when you start doing work on a normal transportation project in a travel way and you have to do lane closures and and stuff like that, and it kind of slows construction down. But since we are outside really of the travel way of the traffic, it these guys blow through this concrete relatively quickly. So I don't see it being long, but I don't want to throw a number out there right now. But if I were to, if I was, I would, maybe say, 6 to 9 months.
Okay, great. And that'll change as the next phases go on, right?
Yeah,
And
when we
we
get
get
the
more
final design,
specific.
I will have a construction schedule, and we at our public meeting and final design.
Okay, great. Great. Thank you. That portion of land by the convenience store and 4D, churches, gas station, etc., it is quote unquote painfully ugly. Can we add some more trees there, is the question.
I think I know what you're talking about. I want to make sure that is the Delta gas station. I'm assuming this is the area here.
Convenience store, 4D, churches, and gas station.
I'm not oh, 4D automotive. Okay, here's 4D. I think this is the area that they're referring to by 3rd Street here. I mean, listen, we're gonna do what we can within the right of way we can, and we are proposing some trees, some ornamental lights, putting in, the textured walkway and sidewalk. But we could look at that, maybe a planner or two, but yeah, I mean, that's really up to the property owner. I mean, we'll do we're doing what we can within the right of way. So.
Okay.
I mean, if you can kind of point out something specific, we can talk about it. I'm going to try my best to respond to everybody's question here, in an email and, in a comment response that we can post on the website as well. Just,
And at the end of the presentation, we will have Mike's email address on the screen.
Yes.
So everyone can definitely contact Mike with more input or questions or
Yes.
comments, etc. So absolutely,
Absolutely.
all of this will be looked at again much more closely.
Yes.
Okay, no new mid-block crossings, but will any of the existing crosswalks be given flashing lights?
Well, you talk, I guess, on the side streets. I mean, typically we don't, believe it or not, you just can't put up what they call a rapid rectangular flashing beacon. There's actually design standards that warrant those, and if the warrants aren't there, we can't throw them up. I mean, the purpose of why, and this is managed through what they call the MUTCD, which is the Uniform Traffic Code. I mean, the reason why, because they don't want people just throwing lights up everywhere they feel like it. Like you really need to justify and meet a warrant for putting it in, and that could really comes down to, like, if there's high incidences of pedestrian accidents, if there's high the traffic volumes warrant it. So there are like certain warrants that go into installing those. But there also is one of the things is its proximity to an adjacent crossing, a protected crossing, which would be a traffic signal. So, but that's really not what the intent of this project is. It wasn't included as part of the grant to really look at those type of improvements. So, I mean, to the best of our knowledge, there's no need for that right now. But again, if the borough thinks that this is an issue that they want us to look at, but we could, but it's really not, whether it would be paid for by the state or the grant, that's probably not the case. Plus, it's a state highway, so they're very particular about those type of crossings on a state highway because it's owned by the state of New Jersey. So.
Okay, and a follow-up to that question is, will new crosswalks be done in a contrasting color or pavers as opposed to simple painted lines?
The crosswalks, well, there's different types of crosswalks. I mean, you have just linear paved, striped crosswalks, or they put in what they call a piano key crosswalks, and we would follow the DOT standard. Each town, the MUTCD has different allowances for, the different treatments. And so there's different justifications for them, but the state, as you can see, the state out here just uses linear crosswalks. So yeah, but there's no plan on, like I said, we're not, that's really out of the scope of this project. I mean, you could do that, but again, it would come down to if the town were to do that, then they would have to inevitably, probably, or the borough, sorry, would have to be inevitably responsible for maintaining them, and they can be, you know, obviously, you know, unlike a paver walkway or stamped concrete walkway on the sidewalk, you know, you put them in a street and you have a lot of traffic and vehicles driving over them, they really don't have a long-term success, those type of treatments. And it would be a maintenance probably for the borough.
Okay. And jumping right onto that same subject, I've got two more questions regarding maintenance and the trees specifically. So the questions are, what kind of trees are you planting? And with these new tree plantings, will there be any maintenance plan provided, and who would be responsible for that maintenance?
Well, I'll let Dom speak to the tree species themselves. We haven't really gotten to that point yet, but I'll let him speak. You know, there are particular types of trees that you're kind of limited to that you can put along a highway, but I'll let Dom speak to that. But inevitably, the maintenance of the trees will more than likely be the borough for anything that we do like that, because the state's not going to want to maintain those trees. So anything we put in would be more than likely responsibility of the borough. But Dom, if you want to speak to the tree species, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like Mike mentioned, you know, those species have not been picked out yet. I've seen a bunch of questions kind of in regards to what trees that we're doing in the chat there, and you know, they just haven't been picked out yet. But you know, they will be strategically chosen for trees that, you know, have survivability in urban conditions. You know, salt spray, tolerant of salt spray, drought. You know, things that we look at are, you know, are there obviously overhead wires, you know, and that's, you know, in the plan you can kind of see some trees that are, you know, smaller than others, ornamental trees. So those are things that we look at. As far as the species, again, specific species, they just haven't been picked out yet. Yeah, so that's that kind of, I think, answers that question there. I know there's a whole bunch of questions regarding the trees, but I'll kind of wait until they come up.
Yeah, like Dom said, you know, we don't want to put trees that are going to eventually conflict with the overhead wires. You want to kind of keep trees that are going to be, you know, not as tall. You know, maybe on this side of the street where we don't have wires, we have more flexibility on tree types. But yeah, so hope that kind of answered the question. And we're looking for, if somebody has any feedback or any thoughts on trees. I mean, I have a project we're working on where the Shade Tree Commission has gotten involved and provided some input on some trees that they thought would look good. So.
Okay. Yeah, we definitely want to hear more about thoughts and comments. And again, we'll have Mike's email address up at the end of the presentation. We're going to keep the tree questions coming. So are those planting areas large enough to support a tree?
So yeah, I mean, again, I mean, the tree species, and depending on, you know, where we're putting trees back or not putting trees in, you know, it just depends on, you know, I think that the tree grates that we have right now are 4 feet by 4 foot square tree grates. So we would, you know, again, pick an appropriate tree, and you know, it's something that we're not looking to install, you know, oak trees that are going to get 75 feet tall and rip up the, you know, the sidewalk. You know, I think, you know, back in the day, you know, I think people wind up installing all these large sycamores and you know, very large trees in these little tiny 4 foot spaces, and you know, of course, it's going to rip up the sidewalks. That's not what we're looking to do here. We're trying to, you know, choose appropriate trees for the space given.
Don't they have the root protectors to the root tubes?
Root barrier.
Yeah, root barriers.
Yeah, you could look at doing root barriers. You know, obviously it's an added cost, but you know, root barriers are an option to help protect curb, sidewalk, I guess, as well. There's, you know, if you really want to start spending, money, it's, you start looking at structural soils, and you start, using structural soils underneath sidewalks or underneath those damn concrete areas that, allow the support of concrete, but allow a lot more, airspace and soil space for the trees themselves. And, it's a proven, soil that, helps trees survive better. But it is very expensive. You start doing that down the whole stretch.
Again, we're looking, if anybody wants to, again, reach out to me after the meeting, have any input or thoughts, by all means, feel free to do so.
Okay, great. And why aren't you planting trees in front of the private homes?
All
Well,
those trees are to maintain, correct?
well, I believe there's already trees there. I mean, I think the game plan is not to, is to keep those trees. I know a lot of people get attached to trees in front of their homes. So our goal really is not to replace these trees if we don't have to. You know what I mean? We're only taking them out if they're in direct conflict with what we're doing. Most of these trees are, mature and healthy for all intents and purposes, and we don't want to, as you can see on the commercial side, there really aren't that many trees at all. So we would be, looking, these are, like I said, mature, healthy trees, right, Dom? I mean, that's.
Yeah, I mean, we could look at each individual tree. If it's not being impacted, though, we're not taking the trees out.
Right. So any widening that would occur would be, on the exterior. We're not going to bring, because again, like I said, we are widening the sidewalk by a foot. So we would probably steal that foot from the interior, maybe a little, depending on the situation. But, we're not looking to start tearing out these mature, trees. And again, a lot of people get attachments to trees in front of their houses. So we don't want, we typically don't try to rip out trees. Unless they're diseased or dying. So
Right. And at this point, have you looked at how many you're going to remove and how many you would be planting?
yeah, well, all that is shown on our plans right now. On our plans, we show the location of the trees, which are these circles here with the grates, and then the
Mike.
trees we're taking out. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I mean, I just quickly, as long as I have the most up-to-date stuff, I just kind of calculate. I think we're removing 27 and putting back 51, so we're doubling the amount of trees that are going back that we're taking out.
Okay, good.
From a quick calculation I just did.
Okay. Good.
Thanks, Dominic. The next couple of chat box entries look to be more comments. So the first one says, the Department of Environmental Protection, or DEP, is promoting non-structural means of stormwater management, that is vegetation, and the use of porous pavement.
Yes, that is true. But in an environment like this, it's really not. So we're not really adding impervious because a lot of this is already impervious already, whether it be bituminous and so forth. So we're not, triggering a stormwater management condition here, since we're essentially maintaining the existing storm impervious condition at the site. We don't typically recommend using pervious sidewalks. There are certain what's the word I'm looking for? Situations where those type of treatments are very work and function very beneficially. But in an urban condition like this and in this setting, especially in an environment along a roadway where you have a lot of salts that you're using, those pervious pavements work well along a trail or where it's kind of off on its own and on the side. But in an environment like this, what happens is those salts get into the structural component of the sidewalk, and they actually the sidewalks disintegrate. The chlorides and stuff like that don't react well with the salts from the street treatments. And the next thing you know, in 5 years, we'll be coming out, and these sidewalks will be falling apart. So, like I said, those type of treatments. So yes, the the DEP is promoting those type of things. In an environment like this, it just doesn't make sense to do that, those type of things. So like I said, we're not creating a situation where we're triggering a stormwater condition. And that usually results in adding additional impervious where you're creating more runoff. We're really not doing that here. We're triggering those type of conditions. But yes, I appreciate your comment, and it is something that we're considering, but it just doesn't work at this particular location. So.
Okay, thanks, Mike. There's definitely some of these other comments that have come in were during our previous discussions, so I apologize for the delay. I know they were just kind of flowing in as we were talking and people were chatting in the box. So we're back to when we were talking about the crosswalks, comment was made that said crosswalks are definitely needed to get to the train from somewhere other than Martine or Terrell.
Really, like I said, at the end of the day, if that's something the borough wants to pursue, they can have a discussion with the DOT. It's not part of this particular project. It's not, you know what I mean? It wasn't included. Again, like, I'm not dismissing the fact that crosswalks may be needed here, but again, it's a state highway, and this really is going to involve a discussion with the NJDOT. Specifically, we're only here to deliver what the grant application is requesting, and that's putting sidewalks in. Now, whether there's justification for a crosswalk at Sheelan's Crossing here, there may very well be, but that's not the scope and intent of this project right now. But there are other avenues that the borough can pursue if they think it's necessary to petition the state for that, but that's not really the intent of this project.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of that, back to when we were discussing that piece of the area that someone recommended, maybe a pocket park or some seating in that particular area. Someone said, sounds like a new borough pocket park to me with that street stub. And then someone else said the borough is looking at greening it. So I guess they're already looking to address that little area. So that was that.
Okay,
And
this area right here. I mean, I could go on Google and probably, find it, but it's like I said, it's really kind of not a safe condition here, because the driver is, when they visually see a roadway opening, they may instinctively want to turn in there, and then there's nothing but trees and leaves. So, from a safety stand, unless the borough has future plans of cutting this roadway through, because it looks like there's a roadway on the other side, then this really shouldn't exist from a safety standpoint overall.
okay.
I mean, as far as,
Okay. And when we were talking before about the concrete, Dominic, one of the questions is, so does that stamped concrete require sealing periodically?
Yeah, so I guess depending on how it, how well it does, and from initial installation, it certainly can use a resealer I think it's, let's say, every 3 to 5 years, depending on how it does. It's not necessarily an expensive process either. It's not that it's structurally, unsafe or anything like that. I think the initial question was more about fading. But the colors and additives nowadays, they typically, they'll last longer, I think, than some of the older stamped concretes that you see around. I think maybe some of the older ones, but yeah, I mean, there is a solution, and it can be sealed, and it's a fairly cheap, process to do. But yeah, that essentially could bring back color. You could even add, additives in there, for slip resistant and all that kind of stuff. So there's always ways to freshen up the look of the stamped concrete. But Yeah, even the slipperiness. I know some people, sometimes are concerned with that, but it's just nowadays, there's additives and sands that they could throw into the mix that kind of avoids all of those issues that might have happened a while back.
Right. And like I
Okay.
said, personally, just on, we could put in a paver block, but as you all are aware, I mean, what happens with paver blocks. I'm going to go right to a slide here that's currently, at the site. You know what I mean? Like you get, I'm trying to find that photo that I had here. You can see what happens with pavers. It just stamped concrete is better from a long term, like over here in this area here where you get this breaking up and unsettling and disjointedness going on. The concrete, the stamped concrete will keep its shape as opposed to individual paver blocks. So from a maintenance standpoint, they're better. Okay.
Okay, great. We just have a couple more questions, and then I'm going to open it up at the end because we've got about just under 15 minutes left.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we already discussed the types of trees and how they were going to be selected, but do you plan to plant the same type of tree for a uniformed look, or do you think that different species could be planted for diversity?
We would typically install, just depending again if there's overhead wires or not, but we like to try to keep groupings of trees, along, let's say 2 blocks or a block of, just depending on how everything lays out. But a couple of blocks, of the same species, and then we would switch to, another species. You never want to plant just one species. I'm not sure if people are familiar with, certain insects that come through. Everyone planted ash trees in the 80s, and now emerald ash borer has, killed every ash tree from Chicago all the way to the East Coast. So those are things that you want to avoid. And even with the oaks now, I know there's, problems with oaks now too. Oak wilt and certain issues that kind of come and go, in the tree world, and so you never want to plant a monoculture. So we like to plant groupings to keep uniformity, but we also like to switch those groupings as you go down the road.
Okay, great. Thank you. And back to the concrete, are there any opportunities for porous or pervious concrete instead of solid or stamped concrete? They say we should be looking for ways to reduce impervious cover where feasible.
Yeah, I think I kind of answered that before.
Okay.
More than likely, the state will take over the sidewalk. Again, we haven't gotten there yet, and I know, for along a highway, and like I said, you typically don't want to use those type of treatments just from a maintenance standpoint because of the salts and the salt sprays that go on, and that gets into the porous, and then the porous is and then they tend to dissolve and break up the concrete mix. So it's really not, like I said, there's a place and a location for those type of treatments, and along a highway it's just really not, the ideal situation.
Okay. I do have one other comment, and then I have two people who would like to speak. So just heard about the issues with using porous concrete. I remind all that we have a stormwater ordinance for years that asks for property owners to reduce the amount of impervious cover, even if they are less than the impervious limits. Also, we have a new large area of stormwater ordinance at the request of the NJDEP that was adopted in March or April. We should be sure these plans comply with the requirements of our stormwater ordinances.
Again, I'll speak to that. I mean, this is not a site development. It's not a land use condition. A lot of the stormwater management regs apply to land development and property, commercial and residential. this is a state highway in a state's right of way. So with those type of, the borough's ordinance, while yes, I think, you want to keep with the flavor of that and the context of that, it's really not applicable, again, to this type of project because it's a state highway and a state right of way. So again, there's trade-offs here, you know what I mean, in terms of, and there's a time and a place for those type of regulations. And believe me, every project that we do, when we get into a stormwater management condition, we do implement those rules because we're required to. But that's really we do. This project does not trigger the stormwater management regulations. And again, it's kind of where we're at right now. Again, we'll have discussions with the borough about this particular issue later, but again, it's really not the borough's decision. It's a state highway, so it's really the NJDOT's call in terms of how and what type of treatments they want to use. Again, we're not here to increase stormwater. We're not here to degrade stormwater. This is a sidewalk project, and that's really what we're doing, is putting sidewalks in to promote, again, in the context of this project, to promote, other modes of transportation, to give people the opportunity to walk and get out of their vehicles and to, create a walkable environment. So that's really kind of the goal. While yes, we want to meet regulations, we also want to. This is also a multimodal transportation project, and we're here to promote walkability. So in the context of that, that also needs to be consideration here.
Okay, great. We just have about 9 minutes left, so we are in the final stretch. I just want to ask that there is one person on the line. If they would like to unmute themselves and ask any questions, now is your opportunity to do so. And I'll also let everyone here in the meeting know that this is your last opportunity for questions before I get to our final two people who would like to speak. So with that, I don't see any other questions and I don't see the caller unmuting. So I'm going to call on Gary, who would like to provide some comments. Gary, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Well, first of all, Mayor and Borough, congratulations on getting the grant. This is really good for Fanwood. And thank you to the consultants for putting all this preliminary work together. I know there's a lot of work involved in doing this type of stuff. And we do realize that there are limitations and restrictions in what you can do, especially since you're mostly working within the right-of-way. However, we do hope you can take some of our suggestions into consideration, because we were somewhat disappointed in the downtown area where the developers asked us to prepare landscaping schemes and plant lists, which we did, and then they just kind of like looked at it, said it was nice, crumpled it up and threw it away. Anyway, again, as Environmental Commission member, we would like to maximize any possibilities for green in this area. We would suggest, and I guess the Shade Tree Commission can chime in on this, is to use native vegetation as much as possible. And as indicated before by your landscape architect, that several species of trees would be used. And again, yeah, we would like to see them probably intermix rather than one group here, one group there. Getting to that infamous little paved section, I believe that's an extension of Ashforth Court. The plans right now call for it to be topsoiled and seeded. Well, since you're already planting street trees, instead of putting grass seed down, why not just plant a couple trees there? And then the borough in the future can decide if they want to put, maybe a park bench right in front of something like that. But I think if you got the opportunity to get a couple trees, because as I tell people, you can plant all the trees you want, but you can't plant time. So if we can get a couple of trees planted now, they would get a head start. And also, if any opportunity exists to group trees together, because we know in the forest, the trees are competing against one another. They get sunlight and such, so they do grow a little bit stronger and faster. So maybe just single trees here and there. There's a few places where they can be grouped. Again, we think that would be beneficial as well. And again, that section of South Avenue is probably more a question for the borough. Instead of vacating that entire triangular area, again, that's another opportunity to maybe put some more some green in that spot. Again, that would probably be up to the borough, but that looks like a really nice area that could, again, use a couple trees as opposed to just a grass area, so on and so forth. And I guess on the south side, you do have the trouble with the power lines there. Too bad the scope of the project doesn't allow you to put all those power lines underground, which would be really nice. But in any case, if there's any opportunity, perhaps to plant some more trees on that south side, maybe smaller species and such, as you indicated, would be beneficial. So again, we'd like to maximize green as much as we can. Any place where you're taking up those parking places, that would be really, really great. And again, thank you for the presentation and all your work on this.
No, I appreciate your
Thank
comments,
you.
Gary.
Thank you for your comment.
I agree. There's
Go
maybe
ahead,
an
Mike.
opportunity. There may be an opportunity in here to plant some trees in these strip areas in here, along the old South Avenue here. So those are areas of opportunity, possibly. So yeah, we'll take a look at that, Gary, for sure. And obviously, any feedback the Environmental or Shade Tree Commission wants to provide to us and our landscape people, that would be great.
Okay, and we've got just about 5 minutes left, so I do want to let the mayor have her comments and her time, so the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good evening to everybody. And I want to thank all of you who have come in tonight to listen and to ask questions, and to Mike and his team for putting this all together. It's been a long road, literally, for us from the time that we decided to seek this very competitive grant to this point. And it overall is very, very exciting for us because it really will really liven up this section of South Avenue and give it the attention that it deserves with $1 million grant. A couple things I just wanted that I had heard and just wanted to help clarify. We have been, I'll say the word, engaging the DOT probably for the last 5 years to try to get crosswalks along South Avenue, over by Sheelan's Crossing, over by 2nd Street. We recognize very strongly that there is a pedestrian issue there, and they have not been cooperative. So that is a fight that we are still continuing. It was not technically put into this grant, the crosswalks. The grant itself, when the opportunity arose, the project was for more of a streetscaping and along the sidewalks and the decorative lamps and all of that. But I am not deterred, especially after tonight. And Mike, I may need your help, to kind of take another shot at them again based on the public hearing that we've had, because there is a safety issue there. That's for sure. To Gary and to everyone about the trees, I hear you loud and clear, and I think with Dominic, the architect, we will go back and take another real hard look at what we're proposing, and to see if there's things that we can do on the opposite side of the street that don't show any plantings, but to create, that greenway that we can, that does take into account the power lines. We don't have to call out for something that's really tall that has to interfere, that has to then be cut down, but we can actually do some greening. I love that idea, Gary, of taking the little Ashworth. We were going to turn it into a pocket park, but I think that we can add more trees there too. I'm with you on that. And but just overall, just wanted to say thank you. And any other questions that you may have as a result of tonight, Mike is the project manager. Antonios is on the call tonight, who's our borough engineer. Liz Jeffrey, who does our economic development, has been listening in. Fred Tompkins, who's sort of the point person for this project from the borough, is also on. So we all kind of heard you tonight, and we are also available through email or phone call. So thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we have had a wonderful meeting. We just have about 1 minute left. So Mike, if you wouldn't mind, could you put up the final screen with your contact information for everyone to reach out to you? You can send an email to Mike, and his email address is mtroncone@cmeusa1.com. Again, his information is on the screen right now. Also, you want to check the Fanwood website. The video recording of this presentation will be linked there very shortly, hopefully in the next day or two. And that's where you can rewatch this video and share it with others so that they can provide comment and input on the project as well. Mike, are there any final thoughts or questions that we should, or comments that we should address?
No, just like I said, just to kind of close things here, if, you know, we were always looking for input and feedback on any of this, you know what I mean? We'll help we'll help address, you know, your comments as best as we can and within the confines of what we're working with here in terms of the grant and what the grant can and can't do. And by all means, you know, feel free to contact me, send me your messages. You know, all this information will be documented and made part of our submission to the DOT at the conclusion of this phase of the project. So your feedback is well appreciated. Thank you.
All right, with that said, we would like to thank everyone again for their participation this evening. And again, check the website fanwoodnj.org and you will be able to find this video for the replay. Thank you so much for your time tonight and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you all. Thank you.